For YouTube. I usually stream on different platforms, but today I just wanted to stream on YouTube to tell my survivor story. I wanted to share with you my survivor story. So, who am I? My name is Dr. Tiffany. I am a therapist. I am a relationship expert. I do life coaching. I do life consulting. Um, and then I have children. I have a family. I have 4 children actually, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But my family and just telling you and introducing you to my family. Um, but why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? If you were on live yesterday, then you heard a little bit about me talking about like my um, that I value transparency, and that sometimes people don't know that they can get through things because they hadn't seen an example of someone that's actively sharing what they went through so that they can relate and then have hope that they can too get through some things. And so in my story, I talk about being a sexual abuse survivor. I talk about, being a teen parent. I talk about these things, and the reason why I do that is so that other people would know that they too can have hope. That is the reason why. That's the reason why. That is the reason why I do what I do. As a coach, as a consultant, and mental health advocate. Like, I do what I do so that people would know that they can have hope and that healing is possible. So where do I start? I'm gonna start at the earliest part of my story that I can remember, and that's with how I grew up. So I grew up in a two-parent household. However, the two-parent household was not my mom and father. I was actually raised by my aunt and my uncle. Actually, it was my great aunt and my uncle. And so I stayed there in that home, was raised by them from birth until about the age of, I say 12, around 12, 13, somewhere around that area, where they got divorced. And then they got divorced. We stayed in the house. He went and lived somewhere else. And my life changed. My life changed. So I went from a stable two-parent household, financially stable, emotionally stable, mental stable. And even though I grew up, and being raised by someone else, so I was raised by my great aunt. My biological parents weren't there. I knew who they were to a certain degree. Like, I knew my father. I could say that I knew my father well because my biological father would come get me and my sister. I have a sister by my mom and my dad, and then I have two half siblings. And so growing up, it was just me and my sister. And so my dad would come get us, and we would spend time with our other side of the family, my dad's side of the family, often growing up. However, I didn't spend a lot of time with my biological mom. And when I got a little bit older, I don't remember really spending a lot of time with her at all. And in fact, I think I may have been, I was older, like maybe 9, 10, somewhere around there, when someone actually told me that was my mom. And yeah, I think I was like 9 or 10. Yeah, when someone told me that was my mom, because I didn't know. Because I didn't spend a whole lot of time with her. Like, I remember her when I was small coming to get me and all that. But I don't think I made that connection because emotionally we weren't connected. We weren't connected. And so I don't think I made that connection that this is my mother until someone told me when I was like 9 or 10. And after that, I like we ended up losing. Lost our home and went to stay with a friend of hers, and like we just kind of was going back and forth. Like, went from going from a stable home to, just kind of going back and forth and not being stable and not knowing where you're going to stay at. And, the only stable thing that was in my life at that time was school. And I'd always done well at school, like, always done well at school. And so my grades didn't necessarily reflect that, things were going on at home. And I lived in a small town, so everybody kind of knew when things would happen. They just kind of knew. And even the schools, like, they didn't push, like, she needs to go to school somewhere else, and because she's staying somewhere else. Like, they didn't push those during that time, because they, people knew each other. People knew each other. And it's a small town, and if you live in a small town, like, you get it. Like, everybody knows everybody. And so, yeah, that was just the most stable or unstable time, one of the most unstable times in my life. And so, we, my aunt ended up moving back to our hometown. And I, at that point, ended up going to live with my biological mother. The first time in all of my life that I ever had to live with my biological mom. And it was a totally different atmosphere. Totally different, because I grew up in a Christian home. Like, my aunt, I grew up in a Christian home, and so some things I just was not exposed to, because I grew up in that that very sheltered and protected environment. And then when I moved with my biological mom, like, it was a totally different environment. So there I was exposed to a life of drugs and alcohol, and I was exposed to a lot that I had no idea. Like, I just had no idea about. And it was hard. Like, it was hard. Like, even though I had this freedom, because my biological mother, she had never really raised any children before. And she didn't really know how. Like, she didn't know how to be a mother. So, I'm convinced that people just do the best that they can with what they know. And so, to some degree, I feel like, she just really did the best that she could, because she didn't know. And mind you, I was 13, like 12, 13 at that time. My sister was staying there as well. And my sister and I are like 2.5, 3 years apart. And so she was a little bit older, but it was the first time that she had her children, like the first time ever. And we were teenagers. So imagine, what that's like, having having two teenagers in the household, and there's all this unleft, these unleft and unaddressed wounds that are there. And then my biological mother just not being in a place, healthy enough in a place where she could really raise us. Even then, she wasn't in a place where she could raise us. And so we did a lot of fending for ourselves. And so, I was there for a while. Actually, I was there till I reached the age of, oh my goodness, I think until I made it to college, I was there. Yeah, because when I graduated high school, I was there. And I stayed there until I was like 17, I say. So it seemed like a long time, but I guess 3 or 4 I was 13, 17. That's only 4 years, at least. So my high school years I spent there. And okay, so I was there for about a few years. And during that time, I was sexually abused twice. Yeah, sexually abused twice. No, actually 3 times. I was sexually abused 3 times during those 4 years. From the age of 13 to the age of 17, at different points of time, with different people. All 3 of them were different people. And I was a different age. I think the first time I was like 12, like when I first got there. So it's about 12 or 13. And then again when I was 15, and maybe twice when I was 15, 14, 15, somewhere around those areas. And all 3 were people that I knew. All three were people that were just hanging around, that the family knew. Like all three of them were people that um, were right there in my neighborhood. And so I didn't tell anyone at the time that they happened, because the one time was one of my mom's boyfriends. And I didn't tell anyone, but I just could remember being just afraid, like just being in this constant state of fear because he lived in this same house. And so I could just remember being in this constant state of fear and constant state of anxiety about every time he would come in, or every time he would say something to me, or every time my body my body was just in a constant state of just fear and shame. And if anyone has ever been sexually abused or violated in any kind of way, like, that there's this shame that and guilt that comes along with that, like somehow it's your fault, and that somehow you could have done something different, where it wouldn't have happened to you. And so I just remember being in that constant state of shame and guilt and fear. And eventually, their relationship fizzled out, and but there were others during that time. Because there's something about when you have wounds in your heart, and we don't realize it. It's almost like other perpetrators can sense their victims, like they have this thing, especially for children, like they groom their victims. And people, like, we don't talk about that enough, and we don't, like, what that looks like is them buying them gifts, or favoring them over other children. Like those are things that are called grooming that happened to me. Yeah, those are things that, looking back, like now I have the technical terms for what actually happened, and I could put language to it. But then I didn't have the technical terms to put language to it. And then when I realized, just in talking to family members and my great aunt, as I got older, and just sharing with her some things that happened to me during that time that she didn't know because I didn't say anything, and I carried a lot of guilt about that for a long time, that what if I just should have said something. But the reality is, the adults in my life should have been protecting me, or should have been more aware of the people that they are inviting into their circle, or should have been more aware of when my behavior changed, because my behavior obviously changed. I went from I'd say I was always think outside the box, like challenging. I wasn't challenging because I was, a sweet child, but I like to test like I would test the waters, much like I do now as an adult, because it's just part of my personality. I'm not a people pleaser. I'm not one of the ones that need to fit in the crowd and and all that. And that's not my personality. It's just not my personality. And it was like that, even as a child. And so when my behavior changed and I started acting out, sexually, I started acting out by partying, and I partied at like 15 years old, partying, going to nightclubs and sneaking out, and and older men and older boyfriends, like all of the signs were there. And the reality is, the adults in my life should have said something. That they should have said something. They should have said something. And so sharing with her, my aunt, who's gonna be with God now, but sharing with her over the years about that time and my experiences during that time, and realizing that part of the reason why the adults in my life didn't how do I say this? They couldn't protect me because no one protected them. They didn't know to protect me because no one protected them. Because it's doing the some of the, like, a family tree is in therapy, we call it a genogram. Doing the genogram of my family, what I realized is that a lot of women in my family had been sexually assaulted, and most of the time it was by older men. it was all by older men. And most of the time, like, I just, from what I learned about my family, that most of the women that were sexually, that was molested, that were violated, assaulted, it was by people that they knew, and that was right there, in the neighborhood that we grew up in, or that was very close to the neighborhood that we grew up in. And so the family knew them. They were not people that, no one knew. These were people that we knew. And so the women that were in my life didn't know, like, they didn't know. And I think that's what happens when you have families where trauma has been passed down, or when things like that have been passed down, is that you also have in there these the boundaries that are passed down, and the view of life, and the view of relationships, and the view of the world, and all of these things are also passed down. They're also passed down. And so you see these things until someone decides, I'm going to break the cycle. I'm going to be the one to break the cycle. And I think another thing that really, just in learning about my family, is that, this is information that I've had to seek out over the years. And some of it has come with me being, like, stepping up and telling my story. And since I've stepped up and told my story, I've heard other family members step up and tell their stories, or if it has happened to other family members, them being able to go through the proper measures of doing the right thing so that it does not continue. So 17, well, let me go back, because the sexual assaults, the sexual molestations and rapes, the 3 that happened before the age of 17, and I was pregnant. Remember what I told you guys about me, like, acting out and all of this? Well, I ended up pregnant, or at the age of 15. At the age of 15, and one thing that my aunt, because she was there throughout the whole pregnancy, even though I lived with my biological mom, my biological mom just was not emotionally available, if that makes sense. And so my aunt is the one who helped me through that. She helped me through that. And so 15 and pregnant, 9th grade. I got pregnant during the summertime, so I was 9th grade going into 10th grade. And I pretty much set in my mind that, I'm just going to have to drop out of school and take care of my son. He's a son. I didn't know it was a son then, but it was my oldest son. I have 4 sons, by the way. And so, I thought I was going to have to drop out and take care of my son. And my aunt was like, nope, you're not going to do that. I'm going to help you the best way I can. And she pushed me to graduate school early, which I did. I graduated school a year early. I went to summer school, took the classes that I needed in order to push me up a grade. So I graduated ahead of my class by a year. Graduated, went to college. But the problem with trauma, the problem with those unhealed wounds of abandonment or rejection, like, you can move 50 times. But if you have wounds that are unhealed, that are unaddressed, that you haven't done anything about, that you don't know to do anything about, that's just kind of living in your body, you have these wounds in your heart, that's all this stuff that's living in your body. But, well, you can move, you can do things, you can move forward, you may even accomplish some things, but you follow you everywhere that you go, which means your issues follow with you everywhere that you go. And so my issues with rejection from my mom, and abandonment from my parents, and the trauma wounds of being sexually violated, all those things followed me where I was going. So even though I went to college, I was not different. My mindset wasn't different. I was still in the shame and the guilt and fear, and still acting out and partying and all this stuff, and then ended up pregnant with my second son at 18. And so by the age of 18, I had 2 children under the age of 2, under the age of 2. And I dropped out of college. I try, mine was like, I helped you with the first one. The next one, you're an adult. Because in my family, we push you're grown at 18, which is not always true because at 18 your mind is still developing, you're still maturing, you're still growing, you don't really have the proper tools that you need in order to be successful. You still need that guidance. And he was like, nope, you on your own with this one. I'll help some, but you're on your own. And I was on my own. I dropped out of college. I went and worked in a factory to take care of my children. And somewhere around, um, after I had my son, it was like the worst time of my life. I say, all that period was like a hard time. It was hard. It was that period of my life was just hard. It was just hard. It was just hard. And so I had my son, and then something lit up inside of me that I gotta have a better, like, something has to change. Like, I gotta create a better world for them than what I've had. And I always say that my children are really what helped me come to myself and helped me, like, I had something bigger to live for, because my life, because I was still stuck in trauma and all of that stuff. My life to me was gone. Like, even at 18, like, my life was gone. I was not living for me. I needed them so that I can find a reason to keep living, to keep going. And so I'm grateful, even though they weren't born to an ideal situation, but I'm grateful that I had them, because had I not, I don't know if I ever would have found the will to keep going. And so I had my son, and when he was about 5 or 6 months, something clicked and lit up inside of me, and it was God. It was like, no, you got to get out. Like, you got to get out. You can't stay. If you stay here, you're going to spiritually just die, and you're going to be just like the other young ladies and other men that are in this town that had similar situations, grew up in very similar homes, and they're still here, but they're not doing anything with their lives. Talented individuals, very bright individuals, but they're not doing anything with it. And something said, you can't be that person. So I did what I needed to do. At that time, I was on TANF, and they had a program where they paid you to go back to school, they paid you to go to work, and like they had all these extra benefits, and I just took advantage. I took advantage of them. I didn't have a car, I didn't have transportation, but they provided transportation for me to get back and forth to work. So I got a job, was working full time, and got enrolled back in community college because I needed some classes in order to catch up and retake, because I flunked them the first time I went to college. And so I went and re-enrolled and retook those classes and applied to a university. And it was the university that I always wanted to go to. Like it was, I knew that I wanted to go to this university because I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an OB-GYN, and I remember in high school getting ready to graduate. I graduated fourth in my class. I had a small class, but anyway, I still graduated fourth, and I sat down with the advisor and was just, she was a really sweet woman, and I told her what I wanted to be, and that I wanted to be an OB-GYN, and I just loved like the birth, and it was something about the birthing process that was just so intriguing to me, and I loved it. And she said to me, well, have you considered, like, I told her the college that I wanted to go to, and she said, have you considered being a nurse instead, and going to a community college instead of a university? Now, mind you, I graduated fourth in my class. I had the ACT score that would have gotten me into a university. But I didn't have the people. I didn't come from a family that knew how to navigate the college process. And so what the advisor said says goes. That's just kind of, that's the town that I came from. At that time, it's different, much different now. But then, it was still very segregated. Um, in 2000, I was 2001. I graduated in 2001. So even then, when did I graduate? 2001. Yeah, 2001. It was still very segregated even in 2001. And a lot of the teachers and all of the positions and that were held by people in the town were still primarily by Caucasians, and blacks usually went to work at the factory, and we didn't hold these professional positions. And I think we may have had one or two teachers in our whole school that was black. So how I grew up, it was almost as if white people know more than you. That's the air. Like, it was a very oppressive town. So it's like they know more. They've had the education. I dare you question them. And so that's how I ended up in community college, and I hated it because it was not what I wanted to do. It was not what I wanted to do. It's not where I wanted to be. She didn't even help me complete the application for university. But so fast forward, I completed the application. I was bright enough to figure it out. Complete the application for the university, sent in the money, did everything, reading everything, because that's how I kind of taught myself how to navigate certain things, is just by reading, because I always loved to read, so I read a lot. And got accepted into college, ended up moving away with my two children. And the college that I got into, the University of Southern Mississippi, at that time had an apartment on their campus, a family apartment that was for families who were going to school, or students who had families that were going to school. And I was a single parent family, and so I got into the student housing, finished school in like 3 years, because I got there in 2003, and in 2006 I graduated with my bachelor's as a single mom. And like, life just changed for me during that time. Like, I think the healing process changed for me during that time. I found the Lord. I found friends that were positive, and that were also in church, and that were, encouraging. And I found a church home that was stable, that were, really encouraging. And I stayed at that church home for about 20 years. 20 years. Yeah, I stayed there for 20 years. But even while I was in college, I'd say the first year or so that I was in college, because things didn't change like right away. Like, things did not change right away. The first year that I was in college was when I experienced date rape. So when I said I'm a 4-time sexual abuse survivor, those are the instances that I talk about. So that first year of college is when I experienced date rape. It was by the partner that I was with at that time. And I didn't immediately, even though I left the town didn't leave me. So a lot of the behaviors and all that things that just kind of followed me. And because you follow you everywhere. Like, you follow you everywhere. And so after that is when, my life just kind of changed. And I was like, I just can't keep doing this. Like, I can't keep allowing myself to be hurt and misused and abused. And, and my life changed. I found the Lord, and my life just changed. Like, it's just it. It's just, I found the Lord, and my life changed. My life changed. That was the main culprit of, like, it was the foundation of my life changing. And from there, I went to therapy, graduated from school, got my first professional job, and just my life just changed drastically. And I think me deciding to move away was the first part of that. And getting into a new environment, getting my children into a new environment was the first part of that. The second part of that was because sometimes we just need to get away. Like, we need to separate from the people that are dragging us down, that are pulling us down, who are not going where we're going. We need that separation. I needed that separation so that I can think clearer, so that I can make better decisions. So that I can think about what is it that you want to do. And I had a professor particularly who asked me, what is it that you want to do? I changed my major like 4 times. I thought I was going to do nursing, but it was what somebody else wanted me to do. It wasn't what I wanted to do. Remember, I wanted to be an OB. But by that time, my life had changed so much, and then things had happened that I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go into social services, but I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go until I had this professor. And my professors were awesome. Like, they knew that I was a single parent, so they were very supportive, and they were very encouraging, and they were awesome. They were awesome. I could not have been in a better place. And they were awesome. They were extremely supportive. And so one of my professors asked me, she sat me down and she was like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what do you see yourself doing? Go past college, but what do you want to do in your life? What do you see yourself doing in life? And I told her, I was like, well, I think I want to work with people who have been through situations like me, like teen moms and teen parents. I didn't know what I was saying at that time, but I didn't know. I just knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I'd come a long way, and I wanted to help people that were in similar situations. I knew that. And so she sent me into this one program that was still in social services, and I loved it. I flourished. I thrived. I loved it. Loved it. Graduated in that program, and connected really well with one of the other professors that was in that program, who encouraged me to be a therapist. And he was like, have you thought about this? Like, you thought about going to get your master's? And he encouraged me to apply to the program. He's like, you would be a great fit. And he was right. He was right. I loved doing therapy. And it was because of going that path that I ended up being in therapy for myself. And that is where I started addressing, a lot of the my own trauma wounds that I didn't know that even needed to be addressed, and even the abandonment stuff. And so I say that to say that I came from, it started rough, but it's ending. Like, well, we're not at the end yet. I'm not at the end yet. Like, I still got a lot of more ways to do. And the working with the teen parents thing, well, even though it's been years, over 20 years since I said that, that's something that I'm working on right now. Because at the heart of hearts, that's where my passion lies, is working with teen moms and having some kind of program working with teen moms. But as of now, working with women, that are also going through their own traumas, and that are healing and recovering from their own pains and past pains, and just having someone that have gone through a similar situation that can help you, that could validate what you've gone through, and can be very transparent about what they're going through and how they overcome. Like, that's what separates me from someone else, is because what I'm telling my clients to do on a day-to-day basis is not something that I'm just pulling out of my hat of tricks as a therapist, as a coach. I'm not just pulling this. These are things, some of these are steps that I have had to walk through in my own life. I had to walk through separation and breakups, and from toxic relationships, and learning how to set boundaries, and learning how to say no. And because I wasn't taught those things. And so I had to learn those things. And these are things that I teach my clients. But the reason why I do that, and I do what I do, is because I want you to know that if I can heal, and it's been a journey, it's been like a 15-20 year journey for me, because even as things come up, I'm still healing, and I still recover, and I'm still. But I want you to know that if I can go from victim, because I lived my life as a victim for a long time, and blaming everyone else, and it was everyone else's fault. to survivor, and then into a survivor, and knowing that I have the power, like you have the power to change your life. And where you are right now, you can be in a very different place with just one decision. Like you're one decision away from being in a very different place. And no one can force you into that place. No one can make that decision for you. But just like I did at 18, figuring out my life, like what you can do too, no matter what age you are, you can make the decision to choose you. And think about what's your why, like what motivates you. Like then I shared with you that my children, my two little small children at two, because my baby was two, well my oldest son was two at that time, when I decided to move. He was two, and then I had a baby who was like 9 months. He was 9 months when I moved in 2003. So me at 18 with two children under the age of two, or two and under, can make a decision to put myself on the put myself on the back burner. I'd already did that, but to use them and their little lives and their little futures, as motivation for me. Then you find what it is that's motivating you, even if you don't feel like you're worth it, because you may not right now. Like you may not see the worth in yourself. You may not see the value in yourself. But find whatever it is that motivates you. What is that? What is your why? What is the why that motivates you? Is it a person? Is it a thing? Is it a dream? Is it a goal? What is your why? And keep that in your face. Like keep it as a permanent picture that's on your mind, on your brain, that when you want to give up and when you want to give in, because you will, there are many times throughout that time, those years, that I've wanted to give up, and I just, I'm comfortable here. Like, we can stay in comfort a long time, even if comfort means that we're going backwards. But whatever it is that's driving you, keep that as a picture in your mind, a permanent picture burned in your heart, so that you can get to where it is that you're trying to go in life. And now those two children that I had when I was a teenager, they're 22 and they're 20. And since then, I've married my husband. We've been married now for 11 years. And we've added two other children to our family, who are 11 and 3. And a lot of times when I'm telling people, like, I have a 22-year-old, like, what? I do. I have a 22-year-old, and there's a whole story that goes behind it. So it's a survivor story. It's my survivor story. And so, if I can, you can. I hope you have been encouraged by this. Thank you.